Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the VeVe Vantage Podcast. Today we have a very special guest who has become pretty well known within the VeVe specimens collector, and he's closing on 5,000 NFTs on the app. Join us to welcome DanielSparkes. What Mr. V and I really liked about how Daniel collects is his ability to min-match between collectibles and comics, as well as his diversity in super cool sets and series, including some high consecutive mint series for his comics. In his wide-ranging conversation, Daniel will share some of his widest stories on VeVe, very helpful tips and tricks that will help new collectors who want to get started with specimens. And last but not least, we also discuss what Dan and David from VeVe should do to get the app back on track. Let's get to it. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us at the VeVe Vantage Podcast. And Mr. V and I, especially Mr. V, have been following you and your collecting journey for quite a while. And he had great things to say about you. And I also did my research on your recent acquisitions and how you were, matching mint based on pairs. So like you have some collectibles and comics matching mints, and you have many cool consecutive mint as well, especially on the higher mint side. And we would love to learn more about you and your journey and your background. And side note, I'm glad that you collect a lot of 5432 and 4321 and not the other way around like my co-host does. Otherwise, this would have been a very heated conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that market is cornered.
Yeah, that's it. Very, very cornered. Yeah. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you, sir. No, total pleasure. I appreciate the DM where you said about, you've had some big guests on the podcast like David Yu, Dan Carruthers, NFT Pirates, Charlie Fisher, but I've trumped them supposedly. So I appreciate those comments as well. I joke, of course. I don't know why I'm here. I'm just a guy from the UK that, is just passionate on VeVe, but no, I genuinely appreciate it.
Yeah, and I will let Mr. V get started with his first questions.
Yeah. So Daniel, when one of the first conversations that we had, I brought up that I was very impressed with how you were going about your collecting, and it felt very sudden to me. But then several other people in the community started to notice you as well, with the things that you've managed to acquire. And when I had brought that up, you mentioned a previous interview that Will and I actually conducted. Would you mind touching on that?
Yeah, one with Charlie Fisher was probably one in particular. So I remember I was doing a trip back from Devon in the UK, which is around 4 hours from where I'm located. And on the way back, I travelled back late at night to accommodate my daughters to have a sleep in the car. And I probably went through around 3 of your podcasts whilst I was travelling back, and one of them was the Charlie Fisher one. And I think that was the first moment where, even though my collection was building on VeVe, I hadn't really paid too much attention to special mint collecting. And I think I probably digested it, listened back to that same podcast a couple of times, and then it's like the penny sort of just dropped. And yeah, I think that was probably the first moment where I just thought, actually, yeah, maybe I'll start having a little look into that world, and it just went from there, which has probably been good timing because it's allowed me to diversify my portfolio, so to speak, on VeVe, create a bit more fun and energy around some of my collecting. So yeah, I think that one in particular was what resonated.
Now, as you got going, were you just scouring the market and just cherry picking? Was there anything that caught your attention in particular as you were browsing through the market?
Yeah, Joe, that's a good question. I can tell you the first collectible I ever purchased on there, but the first collectible I purchased where it had some sort of affiliation to a special mint, I can't actually remember, but I know it come off the back of that interview in particular. You probably know from my collection, I typically focus more on comics, so I would probably say it was likely like a 3210, like a reverse sequential. Just something that might have been a bit unique and cool with a book I liked. and it just went from there really. So I'd say over the past sort of 10 weeks is where I've started to segue more into that special mint side of things.
Yeah, it's definitely drawn a lot of attention. So much so that this particular group that you and I are in. I won't
Mm.
disclose who the moderator is, but he tends to draw in and bring together about approximately 40 of the biggest special edition collectors. And not to say that all the other collectors on VeVe aren't uh, curating very nice collections, but with this one, it's really the who's who of who pays the most attention to special
Yeah,
editions, whether it be year editions, lowest public editions, last editions, so on and so forth. But as people started to fade with their collecting, they were relieved of their place in the group, and new ones would start coming in, and it was very cool to see that you were invited and brought in, and you really haven't stopped
mm.
with your acquisitions, and it's been really impressive. It's been a wonderful addition to the group, and
Yeah,
you something that can't be understated. So it's
yeah.
been really fun to watch you grow your collection and see the passion that you bring to a group of other special edition collectors. And that's really what triggered my, what turned on the switch in my mind. And I said, we have to bring this guy on. We have to bring you on.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I appreciate that. And I think, yeah, when I'm not really a group type person, like I'm very much, I'd say, a team player in my, my sporting, journey and doing things at work. And I typically don't like the group aspects. I don't like that sometimes feeling like you're exclusive. But when I got the invite, I thought, yeah, it just makes complete sense. And yeah, the moment I then obviously discovered who's in that group, it made a lot of sense. So yeah, that's been a privilege. Um, yeah.
yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun. And so now that we've kind of, segued into this phase of collecting on VeVe, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background? Maybe if you have any collecting experience, what's brought you to the space, and just feel free to share whatever you may like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But unfortunately, I don't have the most exciting of origin stories as such. But yeah, I probably represent your typical VeVe user in some ways. So, my collecting experience started from a child. So I remember, don't know if you can remember this, but World Cup Italia '90. So I would have been, 7 years old at the time. And that was my first exposure to collecting, being at I want to say it was the Orbis sticker album. So I know that was my first venture into sort of collecting or that exposure as a child. And where I was from in the UK, which is probably most of the UK, it wasn't your collecting was going to be trading cards or stickers, typically. We didn't have a plethora of comic book stores, comic books just seemed to be something in US movies. You didn't really translate too much to where I was in the UK. So I think that was my first sort of iteration of collecting, and that probably lasted from age of 6/7 up until 13, and then I'd say from that point my personal landscape changes. It wasn't so much on collecting anymore. It was more probably to do with football, girls, not so much study, and then you just teenager life takes over. Um, so yeah, quite standard that approach. But I think what happened during pandemic, I sort of rekindled my sort of, I must have had a hunger there for collecting. So I know during the pandemic, I did some just scouring on eBay, picked up a few things that maybe were, um, nostalgic to me. Whether that be, completed sticker albums when I was a kid. I think like Street Fighter 2 sticker album. Did that ever something that come on your radar?
No, I think the extent in respect to Street Fighter, I think it was the first PlayStation system with
Yeah.
Street Fighter versus Capcom. Like I just remember playing that and playing in the arcades. That was the extent of my
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this, I think there was a few things like that. Pogs. I remember as a kid, big on those, and I just found myself during the pandemic, probably to kill some time. I'd end up building up some collections. It went quite diverse, and I was ending up acquiring things that were so obscure that I don't even know why I was picking them up in the end. But I think that was probably something that there was clearly a fire there for collecting. It just been put away for a period of time, and then yeah, when we got onto VeVe. So I've got two younger brothers who are in their 20s, so quite a bit younger than me, and they were both on the app. This would have been back in sort of summer 21, and the first time my brother Luke ran his house and he showed me, he was like, oh, about VeVe, about this app, and then he brought up an NFT, which was the Superman NFT, and he put it on the dining room table. And I won't use choice. I won't use too many choice words, but along the lines of my response was like, "What's this garbage? Like what is this? And then he obviously give me a bit of an education about the technology behind it, the company behind it being VeVe, and what it can do. It still didn't really pique my interest for a day or two until we started telling me about the price of the item, which I was flabbergasted with, which I think was probably about $900. So when I first started looking at it, I was probably more so looking from an investment perspective, about what this could do. I didn't really have anything in crypto, so I was looking at getting into the space, and I thought this might be a nice way to do so. So yeah, that's how it sort of transitioned from there. And then since that point, yeah, it's I'd say my journey through VeVe has been fragmented from the early iteration of acquiring a small number of pieces, maybe looking at it more from an investment standpoint, and then having probably a year hiatus until I've come back now stronger than before.
Yeah. So when you mention the book of stickers, is that a book of the different sheet, or is it's just one sheet of stickers of like Street Fighter and stuff?
So these were like sticker albums. So
Okay.
I don't know if you had them in US, but like mainly they would be your Premier League
Oh, okay.
annual sticker album.
Wow.
So it'd normally been like a magazine format, consisting of like 300 stickers, and then you'd go and buy the pack from the shop at the time, which would have been like 25 pence,
Yeah.
much less than what it is right now. Did you have that in the US? Is that something you had there?
Not that I have seen personally, but what about you, Miss V?
my parents definitely dabbled in that, and I know that my wife, she's from South America. She's a huge soccer football fan, and she still to this day, like every cycle that she collects the stickers, she gets the book. And then I remember, because she was really big into it, I went to the sporting goods store, and I bought like a box of the packets with all the stickers. And I got that's when I really started to follow and understand the fanaticism with it. So it's more recent for me being aware of it, like, or at least being reminded of it. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll say again, I think this represents the UK in general, but yeah, as a kid, that was certainly a big thing. Um, I went to a school which was probably not the worst school, but it was quite brutal. So I think if you was those individuals at that school that maybe was perceived to be collecting, like I said, if it was something uber geeky, maybe like comic books here in the UK, yeah, you would have had a tough ride at probably the school I was at. So, like I said, that the collecting usually gets suppressed in those early teens.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I also see I also see a high percentages of X-Men comic books in your collection. Is that right? Or it's just like some recent acquisitions that you made?
No, that's exactly right. I would say I've got a nice mix of comic books on there, but yeah, X-Men. Growing up as a kid with the animated series, that was something that was yeah, very much into at the time. So I think that's just helped with obviously being a number of books on the app that are X-Men related. So yeah.
Yeah. So how was it for you going from not having used to collecting comic books to now collecting digital comic books?
Yeah, I think it probably helps with my maturity that I've been over the more recent years. I've started to appreciate art in somewhat more in more ways, and I'm certainly not a big art collector as such, but I've been viewing a lot of the comic books as art in effect, which has helped. So having books like the Gambit FA of X-Men, Bishop FA of X-Men. I just appreciate the cover, and then obviously some of the other variants in those editions as well. So I think that's probably piqued my interest in collecting those. Knowing that it's again a brand that I personally like helps. So yeah.
Yeah. Mr.
So
D?
are you so as if I understand correctly, you're gravitating towards the different covers more so than the originals, or are you checking those boxes that and you're saying to yourself, all right, I want all of the covers of the particular characters from X-Men that I like, for example.
Yeah, I think I've probably since I've started picking up certain mints, I've changed my perspective because yeah, there was a window where I was more looking at the exclusivity in terms of lower mint edition, so secret rares, for example. And I started building up a nice number of the secret rare editions across a range of comics. Um, since I've been looking at certain mint types, I think the common variant is one that's been coming more into focus. So if I can pick up a common with, again, it doesn't have to be a specific mint, but if it's like single digit 2222, for example, my preference is rather have that on a common versus an uncommon or a rare. And
Oh,
again, yeah, being specific to ideally a book that I've actually got an interest in, rather than it being, and again, no disrespect to this book, but if it was like Squirrel Girl, it doesn't probably have the same appeal to me.
no, I understand. I understand. Um, Now, in recent memory, do you recall anything that you said to yourself you absolutely have to have, and then that you managed to go through the ropes and acquire it?
Yeah, I think the it's probably coincides with my journey into more the special mint side, and that was the X-Men '97 one book when that arrived on the VeVe Comics app. So I think that was the one that was probably the game changer for me. So yeah, I would say when that dropped, I made the call to sell my waltz at the time, which was probably it wasn't a special mint, but it was a grail piece of mine. And that was to acquire mint, the last public mint of the X-Men comics, so mint 1000. And then in that, as you know, in that initial activity of a book coming onto the market, that first 24, 48 hours where, especially now where there's an abundance of maybe sellers and not as many buyers, it's that time to acquire those mints. So I picked up the last 3 public mints of that book. I picked up, I want to say it was 990. So the mint looks as, let me get this right. Yeah, it was like mint 900, mint 910, 920, 930. In an ideal world, I would have got mint 92 all the way through to mint 97, but that would have obviously been incredibly expensive. So I've probably been a bit more creative, and I've got mint, going from 920, 930, 940, 950, 960, 970 to make that its own little collection. It's in isolation. But the opportunity was to very much strike in that first 24, 48 window. But yeah, that book was probably the one that I've shifted a lot for.
I also see, so I'm looking at my notes right now. So for that X-Men 97 #1, right? You have mint 1000, 999, 998, and then some other ones too. So when you started this whole I'll call them set for to make it easy, did you originally think, okay, I'm gonna go that route, or did you just find one mint that you think, okay, I can start from here?
Yeah, I would say with the X-Men book, it probably took me in a direction where I knew I was going to be able to build a set within a set. But then it's also allowed me to be fluid enough across my collection where I'm not going to be the guy that's known as mint 3210. So I've sort of spread my, I suppose, collection to that extent where it might just be mint 666 123. And that's probably, I would say, played to my benefit in some ways, where if someone comes to me with a specific mint available, I don't feel like I'm necessarily held over a barrel with it, which is quite good. But the downside is any mint I see across maybe a lot of books that I like still has an appeal, where someone like yourself, Mr. V, you might be very, very specified on one mint. And that probably doesn't help my wallet or bank balance to that extent. But yeah, so I've kept mine quite fluid. I've got mints that I like more than others, and I appreciate mint 1, 2, 3, 4 was going to look more attractive maybe than some others. But yeah, I've kept mine quite open.
That's really smart, and I agree. You avoided pigeonholing yourself and allowing particular individuals in the market to target yourself. So that's a wise decision, and it definitely plays in your favor. So I'm glad to hear that. Now, there are some other pretty cool pairings that you've made. Will's pointed, like, in conversation with me. He shared that he noticed that you have like a Yoda comic along with the matching lightsaber and things like that. So matching a comic with a lightsaber, or things that may not necessarily be a part of a set in the marketplace, if you will. But you kind of mix and match a little bit, but with the same additions. What prompted that?
Also, I
Yeah,
just want to quickly add, the mint is also beautiful too. So your Yoda comic book is 5432, and your Yoda lightsaber is 5432. Just so the listeners and the viewers know. But go on, Daniel.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll shout his name out because I know I've spoken to him before and he doesn't mind. But I can't remember his full name, but Austin. I don't know if he's known in the community enough, but he had a collection he was looking at selling, and it was just a situation that presented itself. So going back to your earlier point, Mr. V, with maybe getting a little bit notice, I could certainly tell that was happening. So I'd get regular daily messages from a number of users saying about how, would I be interested in X, Y, Z. So Austin, yeah, was the credit there. He'd built up a strong collection of 3210 and then 5432 across Star Wars and some Xmen. And it was just a case of negotiation. So it was just by chance that we had that deal agreed on the Yoda lightsaber, and I see the comic available, and I just thought at that point it just made sense to acquire that, just to pair them up, whether that's for my own personal benefit, or if I one day look to maybe sell that item, when you can sell maybe in pairs or en a masse, that those work well together.
Now, I know we've spoken in private in respect to this subject matter, but projecting into the future, what do you see as the benefit of having these special editions in your collection?
Yeah, I would say, and again, if you put my collector hat on, I'll go back. I'll go back to a point when I first come onto the app with my brother Luke. So they were in a network of probably about 30 active VeVe users, all here based in the UK, and they were, I would certainly say, more Web3 focused, which I wasn't, but they were the ones that were probably encouraging, and I was getting tips on maybe certain items to acquire. When I put my initial investment in, which was 5,000 sterling, my brother gave me a few tips, Superman, a couple of pieces. When I went back to what I bought, he was like, "What am I doing?" Because I'd come back to him, so I put this money in, and I've picked up the hoverboard and a few other items, which was against what he recommended. But I think that was probably proving that, as much as I'm here originally as an investor, I just was drawn into the collecting side and actually picking up things that I liked, being Back to the Future being one of them. So I think when I look at what could become with some of these collections, I'm first viewing it as it's something that I know that if it was for the long term, even forever, that I would have an appreciation of. But at the same time, if I view it as I've got three very young daughters, I look at legacy, how much value is that potentially going to have in the future? I know we have mentioned this on our private chat, and maybe some others don't agree, but and I know if's a big word, that narrative drops, digital collecting kicks off, just it makes sense to me there being, some maybe prestigious auction house, whether VeVe developed that, where these special items, and I'm not saying mine's necessarily special, but take the 1, 2, 3, 4 Disney collection, that would be so powerful that maybe that needs something very bespoke to sell that if you ever look to sell it. So I think some of these maybe obscure pairings. I've got the recent Deadpool comic book drop, along with a Deadpool Mint 2222. It just looks cool together, and it didn't cost too much to get those. But I thought if I can then procure that as its own individual pairing, then yeah, those things might make sense.
Yeah, I've I've had a couple of friends, Austin included, who've kind of faded and they've decided to let their collections go, and that's something I hope that we can eventually do as well, like an exit interview, if you will. I've had some other friends in the community who said, you know, we do a lot of interviews with people who have been excited about the platform and collecting, but what about the other side? What about the people who were really excited and had amazing collections, they targeted specific editions, but then they kind of exited, not to draw attention to the the departure so much, but it's more of like, just painting a little bit more full picture for the community. But you know, so as some people exit, some people get the benefit from the collections that they used to have, yourself and myself included. Um, that's definitely definitely our way of DCAing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't intend on selling off my collection anytime soon. I think there's a lot more upside than there is downside. Of course, if it goes to zero, okay, right? But I do see the promise. I do see the promise in the collections that we've accumulated and the pieces that we've curated to be able to share a bit of ourselves, not only with the community, but with our families. And you touched on legacy, and I think that's pretty exciting. I show my collection to my oldest child, and he loves it. And I'm sure that my other child is not too far off from having fun with the collectibles as well. Before we really rev things up with the AR and VR glasses.
Yeah. My children, like they're 2, 4, and 6. My daughters, and yeah, I've tried to talk to my eldest about it, and she's not having it. The amount of times I asked her on the way to school, "Do you know what K-pop is?" Trying to extract something from her regarding the Blackpink. So yeah, I think I'm ostracized in my household with the VeVe side. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think another thing. I know this might not be directly to the question itself, but when they dropped the VeVe Comics side of it, I want to say there was an article similar that Comics and Crypto advertised about this, the CGC graded, wasn't the digital book, but it was a VeVe branded book, I want to say. And I think they made a bit of an announcement. I think it was being built up. It was like a picture of like a hidden object that looked like a GC graded slab. And I think at that moment I did have some anxiety. I could feel it where, it sort of, I thought, well, maybe in the future that does become a thing, digitally grading comics. And I appreciate it's probably hard to say, out of 10,000 common editions, that how can you differentiate between, between them? But yeah, I do see that possibly in time that might be a thing, and then that's where the mints could play a key factor to that. You know, possibly the length of time you've held that collectible could be a factor in actually grading it. So yeah, I think that's been one of the reasons probably why I've focused on comics as well.
Yeah, and with that comes social currency, right? You were able to be there's a lot more attention drawn to yourself, and let's say for example, if you end up going to any social events within the community, there's a little bit more light shed on yourself, um, as a result of holding particular pieces. Of course, there's scarce pieces like the secret rare Miles Morales. People who have that, like people would probably know who you are if you held one of those. And then the same could be said of particular collections that you've curated, and the activity that you have on the platform definitely draws more attention, adds social currency, and down the road that may or may not play a factor, but at least for the time being, we know who you are. and
Yeah,
it just makes it fun because we're able to document this experience that you're having, um, on VeVe, and then we feel very fortunate to be able to share this time with you, and touch on this experience.
yeah, cool.
Yeah. So I have a question. So of all the collectibles and comics that you have, which of them were the hardest for you to get? And maybe if you could walk us through a little bit of that whole process, and like how long it took you, and the things you had to go through to get that.
Yeah, again, I would say because I've not necessarily focused on certain mints, I've not had too many scenarios, fortunately, where I've been having to chase something in particular. I'm doing something at the moment which, with again the Xmen '97 books across the whole four episode range, where I'm acquiring a lot of the books to be able to do something quite creative on that front. So there are certain mints that I'm keeping an eye on. I've not necessarily proactively gone out there to try and chase them as such. Um, so yeah, I've probably not had too many scenarios where I've put myself in a position where I'm really chasing something. What I tend to do, and maybe this is a quite a common tactic with some. I like there might be a book that I will go for where it's mint 1, 2, 3, 4. Um, if I know I can then get mint 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth, I'll make sure I'm acquiring probably the key to that first being the mint 1, 2, 3, 4. So it doesn't put me in a position where I'm trying to reverse engineer it, chase something that's maybe more lucrative to make the set complete. But if I know I had those other additions to it, it just becomes even more cooler than it just being 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, I've probably kept it quite fluid, but over the next few weeks, I'm going to look through. I've put a spreadsheet together to collate a lot of these mints I've got, and I was going to work through that to see if there's any missing pieces, any sort of connecting chains that can be created. So I would say over the next few weeks, if I chase that somewhat, I'm probably going to find some of those scenarios where I'm being found to try and acquire certain mints.
Yeah. So when you are chasing them, because you just mentioned a pretty cool tactic, do you have any lessons or strategies that have helped you to be a better collector, or just acquire a piece that you wanted to get, there, and things that have been helpful for you that might be helpful for other collectors too?
Yeah, I think just having a game plan before something actually happens. So again, if we've got notice that a certain comic or collectibles coming out, just knowing what I want to achieve ideally from that. There'll be some scenarios where I might again keep it quite fluid if it's just something presents itself that's quite appealing. Um, but I'd say generally it's just having a bit of a game plan to it. One thing, unfortunately, this has not happened too often. One thing I've not been doing of late is if I get someone in contact who maybe I've reached out to or vice versa. Um, the other week, again, I won't drop a name, but there was like I owned Mint 1, 2, 3, and they had Mint 245, and I thought, well, if I can connect them, perfect. And they had it on the market, higher price, nothing unreasonable, but fairly high. And I reached out to them, and their response was very much a case of, I really like that mint. So, I wouldn't want to let it go for anything, less than it is. I knew they were only having it on there to maybe speculate, but they didn't want to engage, and that's their prerogative. So scenarios like that, I'll just simply walk away from. But if it's someone who is, reasonable and fair, and it only strengthens the position I'm already in, then great. I like that. I think working together on deals rather than feeling like someone's holding someone else up, I think is the best way to do it.
How do you know when to walk away? Because I feel like if you are collecting specimens, right? Let's just say you get there are 3 pieces in a set and you get 2 of them, and the last one takes forever to negotiate, or the seller doesn't want to make it easy for you. Do you have like some I'll call them threshold from like the floor price of, okay, well, if this P costs more than 20x the floor, I'm not going to even touch it, or something like that will help other specimen collectors? Because I know one thing that Mr. V struggle with is sometimes like there's a missing piece in a very nice set that can take a lot of his time and energy too, and I bet that happens to everybody. You probably included. So what has been something that helps you, or when do you decide to walk away and stop pursuing something?
Yeah, it's Mr. V, we don't share the digits before the X, do we, in terms of what price we go to? But there's been some items I've purchased where the whether it's 50x, even some cases 100x, if it's acquired a piece that I personally have got passion to, then that seemed reasonable. But then there's scenarios where, depending on what it is, it's probably just setting that benchmark in my own mind, knowing that, if it's 5x the floor, that seems fair. If I know that acquiring that piece makes a bigger deal with a collection, then maybe that increases the value I'm willing to pay for it. I do, again, as much as I'm doing this from a collecting standpoint, I will still always have the eye on, if in the future I was come to relinquish this, have I paid an amount for that total collection that would still probably have a future saleability? So it's probably just setting your own thresholds and not getting too carried away.
So let's say like your Xmen 97 #1, right? You have 1,000, 999, 998. Okay, they look amazing together. Let's just say for whatever reason you cannot get the 999, and now you're stuck with 1,000 and 998. If that's the case, would you consider selling it just to move on with that because it's imperfect, or would you just continue going and try to find that seller? What is your strategy to deal with that imperfection? Because I'm sure a lot of specimen collectors face that same challenge too.
Yeah, I've over the years I've got less OCD, which is probably helping right now. So I think that's a good example, because knowing that I had the Mint 1000 secured, which I did again pay the premium for, but it was just felt right. I knew if I didn't then acquire Mint 999 or even 998, that in isolation that last mint was what really mattered. It's just that those adding pieces to it, because where do you stop? Mint 997, it's on the market, it's very expensive. It's like I've made my peace knowing that what I've got is probably sufficient for me. So but then there will be certainly scenarios maybe where I'm trying to do it on a wider connection, that if you can't get that item, you might have to factor in, is it worth retaining the rest? But I don't normally get into that situation too frequently. How have you found it, Mr. V, obviously with your collection? Did you have moments where you got to that point where it's like enough is enough and you have to pull the ripcord, or can you still sit back and look at the collection even if it's not fully complete and go, that's still got a lot of clout in its own?
Many times, most times, I'll be quick to let a collection go, simply because I know that depending on who the owner is of the final or missing pieces, are collectors themselves, and they have a very high price in mind before they even consider letting it go. So um, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I've learned to let pieces go in a set that I know that I cannot complete, and I justify that to myself by saying, okay, with the liquidity that I'll get from selling the pieces that I had from this set that I know I will not be able to complete, I'll be able to work on another set or another item that will only improve my collection and make sense at the same time. Now, will it be instantaneous? Will that opportunity be immediately available? No, not always. Certainly not always. But I tell myself, with as many drops that are coming out, with as many first appearances and things of that nature that will be coming over time, I find peace knowing that there's going to be another opportunity. Just like if you've ever messed around with crypto and you've seen prices shoot up for a particular project, a particular token, maybe the 10 or 20x, for example. Well, are you going to chase that and pay those extra high prices, or are you going to continue doing research, waiting it out, see another opportunity with a lower market cap, and then jump in when you think you found a good opportunity? I think that experience in crypto and being a little bit more jaded in that respect definitely has helped me come to peace with those kind of decisions, with pursue whether or not to pursue particular items in a collection. And I will also say this: sometimes I find that it's best to wait as well and sit on particular pieces of a set, because I may know that the person who's holding the final piece is just looking to make a quick buck. And I've waited a year or two for certain items, and I finally finished some really nice sets. And uh, like you said, if it makes sense, I'll hold on to pieces and just wait it out, because at the end of the day, everyone's waiting for something, right? And these people who are just holding out because they may want to sell a particular item to myself or to someone else for a high premium, they're going to want to, when push comes to shove and something else pops up that they want, or if they see a better opportunity to make more money, they may cut their losses and sell at a lower price. And everyone, everyone has a price. Everyone has a timeline. And when you put those two together, it works in favor of the buyer.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I've probably had new to this sort of dynamic with the collecting side. I've probably been far too respectful to go approach anyone and say, "Oh, would you be interested in this?" I've had some people contact me about when I maybe have advertised something on X. And some of the names I'm only still probably getting familiar with as well. So I don't know those characters that maybe are doing it for the quick buck, or those. I certainly know the ones that are the true collectors, which is most.
Yeah, there's I think when people buy from the people who aren't quite collectors, there's that tuition that we all have to pay. And then after
Yeah,
a couple of transactions, we kind of learn our lessons. But then the well dries up for those individuals when they realize that they can't pull those tricks, those fast ones, over
yeah,
over everyone after a certain
yeah.
period of time.
Which again, I don't mind it. Again, if it's fair, that individual can be good for the collecting ecosystem. It's just, yeah, like I said, when it's maybe like a hostage situation, that's where it's you sort of I step away a little bit from maybe that character. But again, fortunately, there's not many.
Daniel, you have over 1 million MCP points. Do you know the exact amount, or maybe just approximate now?
I think it's about 1.2 ish.
Right.
So yeah, yeah.
How have you been spending your points, or have you even spent them at all?
I've spent stroke wasted them, but no, yeah, I've probably done like most. There was the Wolverine drop. some drops where I just dabbled just to secure a place, which again is what I guess is used for at the moment. But yeah, I'm very much on the saving them mentality at the moment, which is I'm guessing what probably most people are. Um, you know, I did message David Yu to see if they were going to convert them to fiat one day, and that maybe will be the reason to keep them. But yeah, no, I think I'm just now going to save them. Part of me thinks back to the time where you know, and again, it probably has to go some to get the amount of users in. But when like a drop would happen, you know, even just a couple of years back, and how virtually impossible it was to hit a drop. Well, if those days arrive and you've got MCP points, it's probably no bad thing.
Yeah, you mentioned David. So if you were to hop on a call with David and Dan to talk about VeVe, you are obviously a very a big collector and also a specimen collector. So you're super passionate about the app. What would be some, you know, a couple of things that you would want to suggest to them to make it to make the app better for you and to be able to onboard more, you know, more new users?
Are we actually getting them on the line now? I know you're connected.
Oh, no.
There is that.
Not
No?
right now.
No,
There won't be the
no.
surprise. Sorry.
Yeah. I think, yeah, my biggest thing, and I've probably called my jets on it over the past few weeks, and that is just rewarding collectors. You know, I'm confident as much as you can hear some of the FUD, you know, ultimately what David, Dan, and the team at VeVe are looking at achieving, they'll want that as much as collectors and users in terms of having a platform and an ecosystem that is thriving and delivering the best for their user base. You know, what that will mean in terms of how they reward collectors and, you know, add more utility to a lot of what we do. It's obviously still to be is a bit of an unknown, but I think for me, yeah, rewarding collectors and that largely comes with the utility aspect. So, you know, whether you picked up a collection very early on, held it for a duration period of time, might lead to being like an airdrop, or it might give you some sort of discount or just some form of utility. I think all of that is what can be achieved through this obviously digital realm. So that's probably my numero uno. The app, I don't know how you both find the app in general, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the day where that's taken to an upgraded version. So, you know, it could be simple things like just having more filtering options, in-app leaderboards, you know, the ability to do trades and transfers and multi-listings. I'm sure they're all on the roadmap somewhere, but I think that's something that, again, for me as an active user, is certainly quite important. So yeah, they're probably two of the big things. The other third thing is if you're talking like user base, I think just probably, or not probably, just being more engaged with the content creators. I know there's been a bit of a push and a big thing about that of late, but I think having just more focus on like working with yourselves, you know, just to name a few, Kid Arcade, you know, I don't know if you heard recently, but obviously having the ability for him to do maybe giveaways and transfers on his show, you know, almost help him help you mentality. I think something that I'd like to hope will evolve over in time. Yeah, they're probably my big things.
Mr. V, do you have anything to add to the answer of things you want to see on the app? I know you use the app very, very often.
Yeah, I mean, full transparency, my activity has slowed down quite a bit, just because it's difficult to navigate the market, just because of the limitations that we have. And you've touched on, Daniel, you've touched on a lot of the key points that would help further increase the amount of activities that someone such as myself would have on the market. Now, would there be a mass audience at present that will be utilizing those sort of features? I think it'd be more catered to the people who are looking for specific editions. And then, but as for the mass listings, like if you have stacks of something, I think that would be great for everybody because anybody who's stuck around more than likely has multiples of something. And but yeah, I agree with your points, and I don't want to get too repetitive or deep dive too much into each point, but I think those were well said. Oh, and full disclosure, I know myself, I have zero correspondence with David or Dan in particular. No emails, no DMs or anything like that. And I think Will's only communication was setting up that one interview.
Yeah.
But full transparency for everyone to hear. We don't have any perks or anything like that. But yeah, we're just like you, Daniel. Just trying to navigate the space, have fun with the collecting component of things, and hopefully things pan out for everybody. With future promise.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's I coin probably the sentiment from like the biggest bro. His big thing is just enjoy it. You're either in or you're out. You can be in between, but I've now just resigned myself to trusting the team, doing my thing, and yeah, letting it take its course.
Daniel, what I noticed from the screenshot that you shared with me about your collection is the number of NFTs you have kind of have like a hockey stick moment in 2024. So you're probably approaching 5,000 NFTs. Well, getting closer to it. What is your plan? Because you are the guy with the spreadsheet with mints you want to get and those kind of things. And also like maybe this is a two-part question. Do you want to be known as like an XYZ kind of guy, like a 543 kind of guy, or you want to stay flexible? Because what I liked about you is you are pretty flexible with the way that you collect. Like you go for high mint, consecutive mint, reversely like consecutive mints, those kind of things. And recently, like you have a mint 11 comic book too, so you are kind of like over the place, which kind of helped you not pigeonholing yourself and being like psychologically tied to one particular path you have to go. So maybe in terms of your collections in general, where do you see yourself in the next year or two or something like that? And how do you want to maybe like define yourself? Do you want to be like a specific guy, or you want to just follow whatever you think is enjoyable for you?
Yeah, I think I like just being an all rounder, and I've probably now coming from the place where I've built up a high number of collectibles. Up and I would say, well, first of all, the gap I had. So when I probably come off the app would have probably been early 2022 when it started taking a downturn, and I was probably looking like most at my vault value and thinking this is depressing. Um, and that probably coincided with a group home was sort of taking a bit of an exit from it. So I probably just sat on the sidelines occasionally checking in. And then, yeah, it would have been late 2022 I started coming back into it. But yeah, I would say I've been if you looked at my collection at the moment, I've probably been an all rounder with it. And going back to the earlier point, I've still not. There's no specific mint I'm passionate on, which certainly helps. For example, yesterday I got the giant size Xmen book, which is one I really like and appreciate, and I've got mint 1992 to represent the animated year of obviously X-Men comics. So I know it doesn't have direct correlation with that book, but to me that means something. And again, it's quite special. And then a good contact of mine on X and VeVe's exhibition. I don't know if you know personally, but again, a really great guy. And out of the blue, drops me a DM this morning and was like, "Oh, just to let you know, Bishop FA comic 1997 is available." Wasn't his mint, but the fact that he was just sharing that information, I feel obligated to take that up and go and get it because it was on there for a fair price. And I think it's again, that's probably allowing me just to again stay quite fluid with it and not pitch myself as the chap that just does this. But how that then I take that moving forward, I feel like I've the collecting certain items and letting them be unique by having certain, especially in this market where maybe an item that's got 10, 20,000 mints, when there's an active user base, I don't know what's that at the moment, like 3, 4,000 maybe max. It doesn't really set it apart, but then having that addition number to it can. So I would say over the coming months at least, I think I'm probably going to continue on the same sort of path that I have been, which is just picking up items that are just, a bit unique and a little bit different for the right reasons.
Yeah. What I've noticed is over time, with it that only like the super passionate specimen collectors are those who keep buying and keep collecting. So you are a specimen collector. So for somebody who's new and just wanted to get into getting specimens and building like a unique collection, and this is a question for both of you guys, so let's start with you, Daniel. What are the steps that you take if you want to see if you want to build up your collection, or more specifically, let's just say you see a nice mint on the market? What are the individual steps that you take to get in touch with that person? What are some best practices for you to communicate with them and like negotiate the price? Or maybe you can share some mistakes you have made or lessons that you learn from that might help more people getting into these specimens.
Yeah.
Oh, and also if there are like tools that you use maybe to find the owner of a specific mint, that you can mention that too.
And I would say I'm new. It feels like I'm new to the party with the special mint side, because if I look, and this is possibly one of the reasons why I've not been that guy with a certain mint, is that you look at some of the collectors out there, and again, Mr. V is one of those. Some of those markets are just so cornered. Whether it's Marvel's comic or New Mutants '98 with Deadpool FA. If you want to go and pick up a specific mint now, well, that ship has largely sailed unless you're going to pay an absolute premium for it or convince someone who is a true collector to relinquish it. So I'm new in that sense. So when it's a new drop, maybe it's a little bit fair game to me. But yeah, I've just if there's something that I see that I might be interested in, I'm normally quite market led, so I'll see if it's actually listed on the market and then maybe approach that person if it's not necessarily listed on a value that I think is totally fair or something I'd looking to acquire. So yeah, obviously X is very good, just trying to find that person. If they've got their profile details on the app, then great. That makes it easier to make that connection. And then Vault Value, the app. I don't know if that's one that you've used or seen. Is something that I use more frequently now. I can't remember the person that mentioned it to me the other week, but they were interested in something I had, and they sent me these screenshots of a lot of my collection over certain mint types, and I was like, "Oh, what is this voodoo? How have you received this? Like, who's give you this?" And they just directed me. I already had access to the app. They was like, "Oh, just do this." And again, it was just something that's now helped me sort of track certain pieces.
Right. And then when you reach out to somebody, how do you appear like, hey, I'm not desperate for it, but I kind of want to have it? Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm genuinely too nice. I'm not a serial negotiator. So especially if it's someone that I know is again a serious collector, and they're not necessarily certainly not a flipper. I may be, especially my first encounter, I'll approach it quite, probably too kind. So yeah, but if it's someone that I know, again, maybe is trying to heavily negotiate or trying to really push something, then I maybe don't feel as guilty if I'm actually playing a little bit hardball myself. Not to undercut them, but just to get to a point where it's quite fair. Again, Mr. V probably speaks better for this me because he just knows more of the individuals of who he's dealing with. I'm now just only learning that.
Yeah. Mr. V?
In respect to communicating with people who may have pieces that I'm interested in, the feed is just awful and it's too susceptible to having people lurking and trying to intercept pieces. So I put my socials, my contact information for socials in my profile so that people can contact me if they want to talk to me for any reason. And then also, if I may say on the feed, hey, please contact me, or I ask them for their social information, just because it's too laggy, it's too cluttered, it's difficult to navigate on the feed. So I try and refrain from that as much as possible. Um, and and in terms of software or websites that I may use, I like VeVe Analytics. I get notifications on Telegram instantly when anything pops up in the market with an addition that I may be interested in, and I click on the push notification so it pops up on my screen just as if I got a text message or a phone call. I'll be able to see it even if I'm not really engaging with my phone at the time. In terms of approaching individuals, it's I like to ask them what their ask is, and if it's just way too far off, then then see you later. But if they're within range, then I'll tend to counter with whatever I had in mind. Especially now, I think all of us, buyers and sellers, need to be a little bit more flexible. Just yesterday, I acquired another piece that I wanted from the up drop, and I offered a little under 3x the market price, and they found it to be reasonable, and I thought it was reasonable as well, given all the circumstances that we're encountering with the market. So just being a little bit more patient, balanced, definitely helps, and just knowing what works best for you. So.
Yeah, probably just to add to that point, and maybe an earlier point about how I operate in terms of acquiring a certain mint. It's the scenarios where you get presented something that become quite instinctive, and you have to make a decision maybe quite quick. They're probably the scenarios where you could easily make a mistake. But I think just knowing, maybe trusting sometimes your gut feel, but then also having a bit of a level head to know, right, if I'm going to do this, it's got to be for the right reasons. So fortunately, I was messaged about the Star Wars comic #1 book. This was 2 weeks ago, and someone was advertising mint 5477. So made a 477, common version of the book. So it was obviously a big deal. And for me, even though I hadn't prepared obviously that beforehand, because it was just very much presented to me in quick time, it was just acting fast. Probably helped because the time it got advertised, time zone in the UK was fine. In the US, maybe people were sleeping. So
Yeah.
luck in that sense. But that was just a deal we did very quick, done. But there's probably been scenarios where similar things have happened. I've made the decision, gone with it, and looked at it and gone, actually, have I probably overpaid there? But I think still you've got to have that level-headed approach.
Have you ever paid for anything that you regret? You don't have to tell the specific collectible or anything like that, but maybe something like, oh my God.
Yes, definitely. If I would say that more come from the early days. So and again, it's probably good lessons. But when I was first on the app, I made a decision to sort of transition, sell up a few items that held good value, and then I moved into, I think mine was Wonder Woman. That's my mistake story. This was the Wonder Woman, not the FA, but the other version.
Mine too.
More realistic.
Yes.
Yeah, I transferred and went into that at sort of probably 150 to 200 value, and then every time it was going down, I was DCAing all the way down to like 75, and I think that now sits at like 7. But the positive is I've got the most Wonder Woman collectibles in the universe, and I will hold that for quite some time. But but yeah, I think probably like most, especially in the early days, you have those scenarios. It's just moving on from it. How many do you have? Do you have a lot?
Well, I only had a couple FA Wonder Woman. This is the FA version, but one of them I pay like over 1,000 gems for, which is still, low key painful today. But I'm glad it's not, like a more crazy amount with some other collectibles. But that was one of my lessons, just to maybe calm myself down, because sometimes, like, during 2021 and even like up to mid 2022, that rush after the market and just seeing things fly, I think that got to everybody. And it was fun, but it was, those are just stories that we tell our friends, over a beer or something like that
Yeah,
nowadays. But yeah.
yeah, they're not the stories I tell my wife, you know. But yeah, they're no, I think
She's
we've
your
we've
real
all
Wonder
got them.
Woman. She's your real Wonder
Yeah,
Woman. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Oh man, I bought into FA Wonder Woman as well. But I had sold my secret rare Spidey for X amount, and I bought maybe 25 to 30 of them, around like 700 or 800 each. And then I as but then like I always came back to the situation where if I found editions of other collectibles that I liked or found of great interest to me in the market, I would end up selling anything for my stacks anyways. So
mm,
a it was just a repeating pattern for me. Anytime I thought I was going to be stacking something, I ended up selling anyways, just to go for those pieces that caught my attention even more, with because of their specific edition and because of them being a first appearance or what have you.
yeah. And I've taken the approach as well that no one wants this to go to zero and count for nothing, but I, I'm I'm comfortable with that. If it ended up, the narrative didn't drop, it all failed, and I'm left with some nice looking collectibles that I like, and the contacts I've had in the community. As cliche as it sounds, I can live with that. Um, so again, it probably comes back to the whole point of only spend what you can afford to spend, and have fun with it.
Certainly, certainly. Um, yeah, and you know, I recently changed careers, and what I found is that, well, my hours are completely wonky. Like I'm all over the place. Like I don't know what time zone I operate on. Um,
Mm.
but because of that, it's made my collecting experience a lot more interesting because I can communicate with people in my time zone at like 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. No problem. And what I found is that because there's people in Europe that are up and operating in the market, it makes for some interesting opportunities as well. So that's kind of just it was a lingering thought that I had from our discussion about communicating with people and making deals. But anyhow, not sleeping helps. If anyone's interested, if you're interested in anything in the market, because you never know when something may pop up. But anyhow, um, so one thing that I would like to have us start doing for these interviews that we're conducting is we'd like to ask our present guests, so you, Daniel, if you could come up with a question for our next guest, who we have yet to announce and honestly yet to determine at this point. But if you were to ask a question that you would have liked to have been asked to you, or if you're just a curious individual and you have a good question. It could be anything at all, anything whatsoever, as long as it's not inappropriate, right? But uh,
Sure.
but if you have or any random question that you'd like us to ask our next guest, what might that be?
Yeah, okay. It's a very, very good question. To pitch. I wouldn't say this is necessarily controversial. If I was making it very specific, which I might do, it would probably be around about, yeah, what's their opinion on VeVe and the team working with those dormant users? and maybe what creative ways they can do to encourage those back. That's something that I think interests me about what strategy is there. And if I want to add a line of being controversial, and this might change by the time you come out to do the interview, probably using someone like OG Vault, which I might get some heat for this maybe, but someone that clearly cares about the project. I don't know if you ever watch any of his content at all.
I have on frequent occasions, and I still do to this day. I understand, and I'm just putting this out there. I understand that there are plenty of things that we can all say, I'm of the mind that there are no such thing as bad people. It just may be the actions that may not be actions, whether they're words, they may be words that may not be as great, right? Because we're all emotional beings. We all say things, whether they're we initiate them or we respond to someone or something. I just find it to be unfortunate in terms of the way that communication can get very go sour, how communication goes sour in social spaces. But I don't dislike anybody. It's just I may not agree with some opinions or some things that may be stated, but to each his own, and that's what makes us human. So long response to you. I just want to put that out there. I don't have a dislike for anyone.
Yeah, and I'm probably saying this. I know about obviously the video that went out with the clown pictures. Of course, that's crossing the line. And he might have some regret doing that himself, maybe, but it might be reasons why he did that. But yeah, I think I'm very interested in see how VeVe can cultivate some of their relationships with the content creators and the ex-users, and maybe embrace rather than go down the route of instant block. It's almost how you embrace that, and their level of opinion, knowing though that of course there's got to be some sensibility around not being offensive, not being inappropriate. But yeah, me as again a consumer of content, I've this going back from when I got back into the app. I'd watch MC regularly, yourselves, Randy Chavez, OG Vault, and I like I like hearing different opinions, whether that's if you're if you're far right, far left, or in the middle. So yeah, so I think that's something that I would probably be interested to get their thoughts on. How they think VeVe should maybe approach that.
Awesome. We'll have all of that encompassed in the way that we frame that question to our next guest. So thank you very much for sharing that, and look forward to hearing what our next guest has to say to those questions.
Is the next guest OG Vault? That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, so thank you so much for your time today, and I also want to say congrats on like finding this new passion of specimen collecting. You're definitely building like a name for yourself, and you're getting a lot of recognition from the community and particularly from the specimens group. And you congrats on having 3 beautiful daughters and your family too. And so we look forward to having you on again, maybe next year or something like that, to revisit your story and see the things that you have added to your collection, or new strategies, or new things that you have in your collection, and all that. So thank you so much for your time today, and we really look forward to having you on again in the future.
Yeah, no, again, I can only thank you for the invite. I don't feel like I'm warranted to be here, and yeah, if anyone knows me personally well enough, I'm someone that don't like being shone in the light, or I don't feel myself special. I'm doing something that I really enjoy, and just glad to be in the community, really.
Yeah,
Daniel, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Guy, and we'll see you next time.